To open up season 3 of Flywheel Leadership, I'm excited to welcome Tullio Siragusa of Inventrica Advisory. So, Tullio Siragusa is an executive coach and transformation expert, helps leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals overcome roadblocks, align with their purpose, and create lasting success. Tullio is a seasoned business strategist, author, and speaker, founder of Inventrica Advisory and the EmpathIQ Framework, fractional executive, strategic advisor, and leadership coach. Tullio has helped organizations achieve billions in revenues, create purpose driven cultures, and pioneer new standards for leadership and innovation. Welcome, Tullio. I'm excited to speak with you today. Really interested in learning more from you and just really impressed with your background and what you've done.
Thank you.
Um,
I'm excited to be here. No pressure kicking off a new season of a podcast. No
that's
pressure
right.
at all.
That's right. That's right. We open up each show with our Beyond the Bio segment. So I'll ask you a few questions to share more about yourself beyond the highlight reel as an opportunity to learn more about you and your business. So we'll jump right in. So,
Sounds good.
as far as um, your proudest accomplishment, I would love to hear a little bit more about your proudest professional accomplishment.
Oh, it's a good thing you put the professional piece there because I was going to go straight to my children. Um, I would
Love it.
say probably there's a few of them. One that there's a recent one, and one I think is probably a little older that became a category unto itself. And that's really speaks to my approach to things, which is to try to architect new categories for businesses, or at least carve out different categories so you can stand out and really have no competition. So back in 1990, no, 1998, excuse me, I had joined a company by the name of Softtech, and they were a Mexican IT services company that was entering the US market. It had been in business about 16 years, maybe a little over $15 million in revenues, but we're entering the US market right around the Y2K initiative. And I recall at the same time, there were a lot of companies from India that were establishing themselves as offshore companies. This was a time when the economy was doing extraordinarily well. So people weren't so much interested in labor arbitrage, but there was so much demand for this Y2K fix that it just wasn't enough capacity. So a lot of these companies came in at the right time to provide extra capacity for projects that would otherwise have been, not taken care of correctly. And I remember sitting in Monterrey, Mexico, with the now chairman's sister, Fernanda, talking about how do we differentiate ourselves from the offshore players. We've got to stand out in a different way. And we started analyzing what made us different. And we spent almost an entire day just talking about all the differentiators. And we landed on the term nearshore services. And so nearshore services came to life in the 1990s, 1998, right around the Y2K. And that has become the default way of describing how IT services company and software engineering companies serve clients within the same region, maybe are not necessarily on the same shore. So for the US, nearshore has become synonymous with Latin America. In Europe, nearshore has become synonymous with like Eastern Europe. And in Asia, it's still synonymous with India. So that was a category that stuck. And I'm very proud of being able to say often I'm one of the co-founders or co-fathers, if you will, of the term nearshore services. And the rest is history. And I've been a participant of that growth for over 27 years since then, in building out capacity in Latin America for U.S. companies looking for technical talent.
That's quite interesting. I use that term on a regular basis, weekly. I would say right now. So that's interesting. What Tulio? What would you say your superpower is?
I would say, A few years ago, I experimented with a podcast. It's called the Rant and Grow podcast, which was a way for me to fine tune my nearly learned coaching skills. I wanted to have a way to develop that muscle. And so I said, why don't I put together a podcast and I'll give people free coaching sessions, but in return, they have to agree to be on a podcast. So what I discovered in that experiment is that within 30 minutes, I had this keen ability to quickly identify the belief that holds people back. And I had also developed an interest and talent towards integrating neuroscience techniques into my coaching. So I was the traditional coaching where you work with people on SMART goals and things of that sort, but I had also infused it with neuroscience techniques, which deal with beliefs. And I discovered this superpower, as you're calling it, just doing these interviews. That within 30 minutes, uh, I can discern what is going on with an individual with their repetitive patterns. I can tie back to something that maybe happened to them when they were a child. And I'm not a therapist, but in every case, if you went and listened to every one of those episodes, I could uncover that blockage that created a belief for someone that stops them from being successful. Because if you're a coach, you can give someone a great plan and they can agree to it. And if you follow it on paper, you will succeed. However, most of the time, what happens is if you have a belief that stops you from moving forward, you're never going to make it happen. So I always equate this to the example of a baby elephant tied to a pole. It tries to break free. It tries to break free over and over, possibly for a few years, but it can't. It cannot break free. It's not strong enough. And then it becomes this behemoth, large elephant that still gets tied to that same pole, and it doesn't even try. It doesn't try because it believes it cannot. It has precedence in the past that says, don't try because you're going to fail. Meanwhile, it could break free instantly. So, how do you rewire your mind to be able to believe that you can? And that's what neuroscience coaching is all about. And so, I was able to identify in every one of these coaching sessions very quickly in 30 minutes that belief that was created back when they were younger that blocks those people from moving forward with breaking through some of the repetitive challenges that they would share with me. So my superpower is really this ability to discern very quickly and see past the words, what is going on, the underlying feeling that someone has or belief that the trauma that's still there, so to speak. And so it really is just empathy, caring enough about someone to want to discover the root cause of what's holding him back is really my superpower. I consider
Well,
it a divine gift. It's not mine. It's been given to me to use.
that's great. Thanks for sharing. When it comes to your business and what you specialize in, could you give us the 30-second kind of spiel on what that looks like?
My business is really simple. I create environments where people feel empowered. And so I enable organizations to become decentralized, autonomous organizations. That's what I do. With that comes all the components of helping an organization move from codependent, the CEO, the owner making every decision, to one where there's decentralized decision making, empowerment, so that those owners or founders or CEOs can get their lives back, because quite often that's what they do. They get their life back because they now get to focus on things they love to do versus things they have to do. So I often say my job is really to liberate everyone in the organization, including the CEO, to being able to do what they love doing and collaborate in a way that moves the needle forward more effectively and actually costs less and is more profitable. So that's the business I'm in, is helping organization get more done with highly engaged teams and executives that actually feel good and happy about their jobs.
Love that. Thank you. Um, Tullio, when it comes to more of, you look at leadership and teams and business in general, do you have any controversial takes or anything that's maybe a little bit away from the norm on all the business speak out there? Anything that kind of comes to mind as your way of looking at it versus what you hear out there a lot of times?
Yeah, about 7, 8 years ago, I co-founded a movement called RadicalPurpose.org, and it's a bunch of self-management practitioners that came together. Some well-known self-management practitioner like Doug Kirkpatrick, who's the co-founder of Morningstar, and others, and we really began to look at what creates highly engaged cultures. And we spent 2 years, both with psychologists and these practitioners, really digging in and understanding what creates really highly engaged cultures. And there was a lot of design thinking principles built into how we went about that. Being a practitioner of design thinking, I've also been an advisor to at the university level in design thinking. And the one thing that came from this is it's easy to often say that an executive team could be toxic in how they lead people because that's who they are. But the reality is, and this one might be controversial, it's not who they are; it's who the organization is. They step into the role to fulfill what the organization is. So you could take a really empathetic, kind-hearted servant leader and you put them in an environment where it's a command and control structure, a fiat structure, predicated on compliance, and they will become toxic. They will become the kind of boss you don't like. So it's systemic. So the way to solve that sort of toxic executive realm that often people complain about is not at the executive level. It's not by firing executives and changing them. It's actually to restructure the way the organization runs. And so the command and control paradigm that is pervasive in most companies is ineffective. Not only does it not serve the needs of people, and we see it because 80% of employees are disengaged. That is the true epidemic of our time. Imagine you spend most of your living life at work, but you're disengaged, you don't like it. That's a awful way to live. And then we wonder why mental illness is so high, right? We are not creating the environments where people can step in and grow and thrive and feel fulfilled. We're just not creating those environments. And so the what I've discovered is when you actually take an approach where you create equivalence, where everybody treats each other as adults and works as a team, that collaboration increases not only productivity, engagement, but effectiveness. And there's really no need for middle management layers at all in those environments. So, um, so initially when we came out with these things, people thought we were the crazies who thought, we were just trying to do the right thing by people by creating these people-centric cultures. But most recently, we've sort of been validated because there's a lot of research from Deloitte and McKinsey and others who are basically showing the stats of what happens in these kinds of organizations. So it's actually a strategic imperative to move in this direction. The problem is it's not taught in MBA programs. HR certification programs don't teach any of this. They teach compliance. So most organizations are ill-equipped to transition into this model, which is why I created the EmpathIQ Framework, which is a system for navigating from where you are as a traditional organization with everything going up from up the chain with rubber stamps to one that's decentralized, where everyone acts as if they're the CEO. It's a year and a half, 2 year long transformational process. But what happens is you get a 3x operational improvement, 3x capacity without any additional headcount. I mean, that is significant. So if you have 50 employee company, you're now punching at the weight of 150 employee companies. And by eliminating all the silos that usually exist in organizations, you move a lot faster. You don't have the same friction points that exist between the kingdom owners, so to speak. And so the controversial thing is run a business that's people first, with a lot of empathy, empower people and treat them as adults. People make difficult decisions every day: where to live, whether to get married, whether to have children, what kind of car to drive, what kind of house to live in. They make difficult decisions every day. They're perfectly capable of making difficult decisions in business. You have to create a model where people can thrive and can step into that. Focus on creating co-leaders. have a system that creates visibility and transparency. You have to have frameworks to do that effectively. It's not just go ahead and have fun with it. That's just chaos. And learn that hierarchy is needed, but it's not the hierarchy of most organizations where it's based on title. So it's based on merit. So if you are a leader, it's because people believe in you and follow you because you're willing to serve them versus you have the title, so they're trying to be compliant. And that's a significant difference of how most companies are running today. There's compliance because of titles versus following people because they're willing to serve. And so I don't know if that's controversial, but I truly believe, because I've lived it and seen it, that most organizations today are ill equipped to compete in an AI future, for example. Uh, most of the AI initiatives will fail because AI requires decentralized organizations, decentralized decision making. It requires agility. And if you have everything going through a rubber stamp of approval process or compliance process, AI is going to fail because it's not designed for that. It's designed to move quickly. So most organizations are going to have a rude awakening about adopting AI, not because the technology doesn't work, because the organizational structure is not ready for it.
That resonates strongly with me when it comes to that command and control concept, and just a different way of looking at it along with the technology. Um, could for
Even in the military, they discovered that doesn't work. I mean, if you look at the book Team of Teams by General Patton, talks about how the Vietnam War failed because it was a command and control structure,
Yeah.
versus now they're moving more towards teams of teams, where teams have the empowerment to work together and do what needs to be done as a team, and that's a lot more effective. I mean, look at what happened with that SEAL team that
Mhm.
went after Osama bin Laden. That was a team environment. It wasn't led by some general. It was actually a team making those decisions together. So even in that context, it works extraordinarily well. It's been proven over and over, for sure.
No doubt. So for those founders, CEOs, leaders out there that are looking to elevate their leadership, could you define command and control, and so they know who they are, if that's what is possibly holding them back?
And it's not their fault, by the way.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
were sold, especially our generation was sold on this idea that you climb up the ladder, and when you get to the top of the ladder, that's the place you want to be. That's where all the power, prestige, and pleasure and profits are. They live there. That's when you've gotten there, you've arrived, right? And then you get there and you realize, man, it's really lonely up here, and you're constantly looking over your shoulder to see who's going to throw you off the seat. So it's a terrible place to be. And any CEO that's been there or who's there will tell you that is the truth. They might hide it very well. They'll put on the mask, but when they go home and take off the mask, and they're exhausted, because it's a way of living that's duplicitous. You got to be one way at the office, and then you get to be your real self at home where you feel safe. It's an exhausting way of living. And any CEO that's watching this, that resonates. That is true. So if you're finding yourself exhausted, you're in a command and control environment. If you're finding yourself where everyone goes to you for everything, you're in a command and control environment. If you are finding yourself frustrated with people's inability to make a decision, you're thinking it's them. No, it's actually how you are structured in your organization. And it's an environment that's predicating on everything having to go through you. So there's telltale signs that show that. Now, if you're the kind of person who fires people because they disagree with you, that's a bigger issue too. Now you're in that system for so long that you've become a megalomaniac, right? Where you need the validation by people agreeing with you, and if they don't agree with you, your insecurity doesn't allow them to exist in that environment. So there's different layers of signs that you've been in the system long enough that's changed you in a negative way, that's made you, without realizing it, toxic. So if you're seeing these things, if you're finding yourself having to fire people because you don't like what they have to say, that's a problem. You're in a system that eventually will fire you. Okay, so it's exhausting to be there. It's too tiring. That's why you got a lot of people dying too young, having heart attacks. It's not a healthy environment. So that's a telltale sign. If you're quickly focused strictly on performance, and you don't know how to manage your board to set expectation on the fact that this business is run by people, not machines, that's a problem, right? And you can't do anything about that sometimes, where you feel like you have to keep perpetuating the system, but you can. And the minute you step away from that and you change direction and you create a more collaborative environment, not only will you meet all the expectations of the board, all the expectation of Wall Street, you will exceed them, but you'll do it in an organization that actually feels good about working with you, and you'll feel good about working with them. There's a significant shift that happened. And it's not a long time. A year and a half is not a long time to make that transition if you have the right help.
Definitely makes complete sense. Thanks for walking through that a little bit deeper. So a few things. Taking a look at your content, your ways of working, frameworks. I see a few threads through your work when it comes to, um, it didn't take long to really kind of see, how you're set up as far as your ways of thinking and what you're driving with leaders. Leading with purpose and authenticity, fulfillment and serving others, inspire teamwork without needing control, and mastering emotional intelligence. So those four concepts right there, and I know there's a lot more behind that, but those four, like what, how can you sum that up to us on why those are important, or what comes to mind on like why a leader should listen to that?
There are four key tenets that create highly engaged cultures. That goes back to that study we did over a period of 2 years. Number one, we are all designed to have a desire to belong to something greater than ourselves. This is why religion and politics is so big worldwide. It's a desire to be part of something greater than ourselves. Number two, we need to have meaning behind our lives, behind what we do. This is why we still have families. This is why we build stuff. Again, this is also why we get behind certain movements. It gives meaning to our lives. Three, we have a desire to make an impact. The same reason we have families, we build stuff, we get behind initiatives, we get in volunteer. There's a desire to make an impact, which is why we love growing businesses and establishing new businesses and solving problems. It's a desire to make an impact. And finally, it's the need to be becoming, which is why the self help industry is what, like $1 trillion? We all have a desire to become greater than what we are. So when you synergize these things in how you run a business, you create an environment that is very people centric, that's purpose driven, that's empathetic. But you have to have a guiding star, right? Where are you heading? What is the greater purpose? What is the meaning? What makes people feel like they belong to something greater than themselves? So the purpose becomes the new boss, right? And establishing that purpose, why do you exist beyond making money is the big question, right? Um, and most of the times, organizations that do this, there's a few people who are sitting on a table designing what the purpose is. But what I offer is have one that's designed by the entire company. So I'll give you an example. Um, at Zero Company, which is one of my clients where I'm a fractional COO, we redefined our values and purpose by getting everyone in the company to share their own personal values, their own personal purpose. So everyone shared them, and then we amalgamated all the inputs to create what the company's purpose was, what the company's shared values were. And so it took a little time to get everyone's input, but now what you end up with is a company where everyone's already bought into what we do and why we do it. It's not something that some people decide and they have to go sell it to the rest of the organization or get people to comply with it. Everyone contributed to that. So when you hire a new employee and they ask, well, how did we come up with this purpose or these values? Any employee in the organization can say, I did that. I came up with it, and so did everybody else. That's significantly more powerful than a few people sitting at the top deciding the direction of the purpose of the company. But either way, you have to have a North Star. So the purpose becomes the driver. And then you create an environment where you are constantly questioning or reinforcing the purpose in even your meetings and even all your decision making. How does this decision tie into our purpose? Does it support our purpose or does it move us away from our purpose? Every decision that gets made on the premise of either supporting the purpose or not being aligned with the purpose. That becomes the new boss. And that becomes the equalizer where everyone is led by the same desire to fulfill that purpose. So you have to have a collective input so that everyone's bought into it voluntarily. And then it has to become your guiding star. When you operate that way, you can pivot any situation in the market because everyone is committed to the same end goal, fulfilling that purpose. So purpose driven really just means replacing the CEO as the boss and elevating it to something that's of greater purpose, greater importance for everyone in the organization, where everyone is guided by it, including the CEO. And you can just imagine, you look at an organization like Patagonia, they're masterful at this. REI, right? Get people out there. What did REI do? They actually on a Black Friday, they closed their shops. REI's closed on Black Friday. You know what they do? They tell the employees, go out there and have fun. We're a company encouraging outdoor fun. Well, on the biggest sale day of the year, we're going to get our employees to go out there and have fun. And that's been them living their purpose, right? So, and it's the kind of company that's synonymous with outdoor fun, and they have great quality. Just some examples of that, right? So that becomes the guiding principle. In order to do that, you have to tap into emotional intelligence. You have to become self-aware. You have to understand the underlying human needs behind what you're doing. Once you have that in place, then everything just automatically aligns because you create resonance. That resonance, it feels like, when people say that I vibe with this, right? That's what it means. There's a likeness of who you are. And you end up attracting people that are similar, that have similar values, similar desires. And that's when you create an environment that's really unstoppable because you got like-minded people. They don't all have to be the same, but like-minded in their desire to achieve a purpose or a mission, something that resonates with people. And when you have that, then you create a model for friendship, which I often tell companies, never say we're a family. That's the worst thing you can do as a company. A lot of family have dysfunctional members, really dysfunctional members that you didn't choose in your life. They're part of your family. You can't do anything about it. But friends choose their friends, right? And they work together. And friends do three things. They support each other when one is down. They celebrate each other. So they're not competing, looking over their shoulder. They're celebrating each other. And they call each other out when one's going off track. That's what a true friend does. Now, if you create that model inside of a business and you work as teams, you can't stop a business like that. You can't compete with them. It's impossible.
That's great, Tullio. I don't think I've ever heard the friendship aspect. I hear obviously the family and some of the positives and negatives of that, and along with teams, more like from an athletic reference. But friendship, that's interesting. Appreciate you
Think
sharing.
about sports teams, right? Which sports teams succeed the most? Those who are just showing up to work together or those who actually bond together as a team?
Exactly.
Those who bond together, they're always going to outshine everybody else. So it's no different in business. We know that formula works in sports, but somehow we're not adopting it in business. You just work as a team, bond as a team, develop connection, develop trust, develop love for each other. And that doesn't happen in command and control environments because those environments create competition and look over your shoulder mindset. So you have to create equivalence in order to do that. In a team, there's equivalence. Yes, someone's acting as the captain, but there's equivalence on that team. So the model's there. We learn it early on in our lives by playing sports, but somehow we don't carry it into business because we've been sold on this idea that it should have this structure and all this stuff. That structure was predicated on the Industrial Revolution. You needed to have structure because people would die if you didn't have processes, right? You're manufacturing stuff, you're building stuff. If you don't have process, you have safety standards, people would die. So you had to have that. But in the knowledge space, we're still operating like we're in the industrial age. It makes no sense. In the knowledge space, it's about empowerment and innovation. So you've got to work as a team. And to do that, you have to create equivalence. There's no other way to do that other than create equivalence. If you want to win, if you don't want to win, then you can continue to operate in an environment where people are competing with each other instead of competing with competitors in the marketplace.
Definitely. Yeah, that distinguishing between knowledge and industrial, I think, is an interesting way to look at it for sure. Tullio, when it comes to your any stories or points you'd like to make, anything that comes up to mind from this conversation that you'd like to share as far as a story from your experience or any just additional points to this conversation.
I am one story comes to my mind. I've been fortunate to have been involved in a number of post M&A integrations in my career, and I've really fine tuned that craft. And the last one, I remember there were six companies coming together, five acquired companies coming together, and the CEO was like, "We need to create a new name, a new brand strategy." So the team began to go down that path, and I was like, about a month or two into it, it's like, hold on a second, let's rewind a little bit. What are we trying to do here? Uh, there's two ways to go about a post M&A integration. One is everyone, the acquired company feels like the conquered, and you just go in and say, "This is how we do things," right? Um, and that's incredibly disrespectful because there's a reason you bought that company. They had achieved a certain growth based on their culture and their operating model, and now you're coming in saying you're going to operate the way we do things. You're almost like it's counterintuitive to this idea of why you bought them. So that, and most M&As, post M&As actually fail because they fail to get the synergies and the integration right. The other way is to do it where you step into a new entity together. And you could think of it as like, we're a startup now, but it's a startup with six companies coming together, 10,000 employees, stepping into a new brand together. So let's start by defining who we are. Let's get all the employees to share what they value. Those become our shared values. What is the purpose of why we exist? Let's define that together. Let's get all the employees across all the companies to define that. Pretty much what I just described earlier, right? So you start by defining the roots of the tree. What do we stand for? What are our values? Then you develop the trunk of the tree. What are the guiding principles that we want to abide to as a business? We haven't talked about anything about integrating sales, marketing, offering. We're just integrating people. So by doing that, you create a shared environment, shared value where no one feels like the conquered. Everyone is stepping into a new reality together. And people are more open to doing that because they realize, well, my old way of doing things are going to go away, but they can go away in a way that feels painful, or I can contribute to maintain some of my greatness into this new reality. So people are motivated to do that. And it took about a year and a half to do this. And then the rest was easy, establishing the brand name, the brand book, all those things, because then you had a full buy-in from the entire organization. And guess what? Most post M&As that happen, then you go on a road trip to sell everybody on why it looks the way it is, right? So now you spend a year doing all this work, and you spend another year selling it to the organization, hoping people buy into it, and you don't lose your top players along the way. This is faster. Yes, you spend time doing it, but everyone's bought into it because along the way, all those participants are sharing with their teams what's going on. So there's transparency, there's visibility, and you come out on the other side ready to move forward as an entire organization. And that's when you asked me what are some of your great success stories, that was the second one that came to mind. That definitely would be up
Yeah.
there. And what I learned from that is focus on integrating the people first, then focus on the systems, the processes, and all those things, and do it with those same people you've integrated. And so you can create so much more synergy. And by the way, that company, once it became a unified brand, got acquired for $1.5 billion. So the success is in the results of creating that kind of unified front. And they're one of the market leaders in the space. So there's something really powerful when you actually do M&A in such a way that's loving, kind, and with the mindset that you're integrating into a new reality together versus feeling like you're the conquered.
No, that's a great story. Have you read How to Make a Few Billion Dollars from Brad Jacobs?
I have not read that book,
Okay, well, I would
but I'm going
recommend
to make
just
a
based
note
on
of
that story
that.
alone. Yeah, like either reading the book or just checking up on some of his ways of working, what he's done with XPO and some of those companies. Making I don't know $8 billion companies now or whatever his track record is, but. some of that M&A with people integration really speaks clearly from that story you shared. So
Interesting. I have to
um,
check out the book. I'm
yeah,
sure I'm
yeah,
not the only one who thinks this way. So
yeah. It's interesting in his case, just at the level he's operating at, um, that how much the people really matter and the questions he asks them when he walks into a new company to acquire them or whatever. So yeah,
And here's the nice thing about this: when you understand that it's all about the people, it doesn't matter what business you're in. You could be in the manufacturing of basketballs or in AI. It doesn't really matter because everything is driven by people. So once you get the people equation solved, the rest just flows very easily. So, I could apply the same playbook in any industry in any company because the people operate from a similar mindset. Those four tenets we talked about are the key things to engaging to get people engaged. So if you do those four things right intentionally, this is one of the reasons. Like even though I've been an advisor to the University of California on the design thinking program for almost 5 years, I've now evolved that thinking into what I call intention based design. Right, so you can start with intention up front and design based on that intention, but it's all predicated on people. So once you get that right, the rest is easy, relatively easy.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. What's the one thing you've changed your mind on over the span of your life or career?
Oh, I don't need to be the boss. I don't need to be the CEO. I wanted to be the CEO when I was younger of a company because I was striving for the same thing every CEO is striving for. I felt once I achieved that, then I've arrived, so to speak, right? And the only reason I would want to be the CEO of a big company now is to liberate it. Is it would be a great canvas to go and put all this in place to liberate it, to create an environment where people feel really great about themselves. I truly believe if we can influence more businesses to operate this way, it will also impact society in a positive way. This is where we spend most of our time and day. So if people learn this principle of equivalence and respect and caring and empathy, it will carry over into everything else, and also it will stop this terrible epidemic of disengagement, and people can just be themselves all the time instead of wearing masks. So my desire now would be if I could be the CEO of a multi-billion dollar company with 100,000 employees, is to set those 100,000 employees free and give them a sense of purpose that makes them feel good about being there. That would be a tremendous accomplishment personally for me of wanting to have done something meaningful and legacy worthy. So it's that's where I've changed my mind. It's not I don't want it for the power or the prestige. I want it for the influence and the ability to set people free. To the ability to put myself out of that job is really the goal. So that's what's changed.
Well said. Well said, Tulio. I love that mindset, and I think that's for leaders. That's what a lot of what it's about is, like you said, empowering people, but also like your job is to get other people ready to take your job, right? So that's exactly right. Um, we've gone through a fair amount, but anything that I haven't asked that you'd really like to talk about that maybe is a question that you would have liked to answer. Anything comes to mind for you?
Maybe just sharing what my biggest concerns are moving forward for businesses that are adopting AI and in a digital reality that we're living in is that as more time goes by, people are going to lose more and more social skills. And and it's a dangerous place for society where we're feeling disconnected, where everything is a resource, including people. I hate using that word to describe people. We're not resources. We're not assets. We're not things you move about. We're people with feelings and desires and fears and and have opportunities. And so I really believe that companies need to make a concerted and intentional effort to help people continue to be engaged. And I know some are doing it by saying, let's go back to the office. That's a way to kind of force, let's keep people engaged, go back to the office. But it can't come from a force place, right? One of the things I love about self management is that there are two principles that guide it. One is no force, which means no coercion, no manipulation, no force at all. You can't get people to do what you want them to do. And the second is 100% self accountability, which means in order for it to work, I have to show up fully ready and willing. So when you have this model where I can't force you to do something, but you need to show up 100% and give, and everyone operates that way. And if you have a friendship model, well, everyone holds each other accountable to that, and everybody celebrates each other, and everybody supports each other. You can't fail in that kind of environment. So I pray and I hope that more and more companies adopt self management, not only because it's going to help them maintain that engagement, but it's the most human way to run a business. And it turns out to be the most profitable way to run a business too. And I'm hoping more and more realize this is not just a nice thing, it's actually strategic. If you're motivated strictly by performance, then make a decision to go in that direction because it's strategically going to help you be more profitable. And at the same time, it will benefit people. So I hope that as time goes by and we embrace more digital, we find ways to remember our humanity and reconnect to that. And I think it's going to create opportunities for coaches, for people to do more of that. And it's not going to come from some AI chatbot you talk to. It's got
Right.
to be human to human. So just like the Renaissance age, I believe at some point we will experience a new Renaissance where people will reconnect with poetry, art, and people connection. Um, because it's going to be necessary. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. At least that's my desire. If I can contribute in that direction in my small way, then I'm going to continue to do that.
No, it makes sense. And I've had similar experience, and that really speaks to me on the way you describe that, and that human connection is it does seem like it's going to be the lost art that comes back around very quickly, right? So, you've been kind enough to share about your journey. What questions do you have for me? Anything you'd like me to share with you?
What's the common thread you've noticed with people you interview? Um, where are you seeing industries and markets going based on the feedback you're getting? Are we seeing more humanness in how things are done, or is the prevailing thought still about performance at all costs? I'm curious, based on everyone you speak to, what's the temperament you're feeling of where things are going?
I think the way you just described it in the previous point you made kind of sums up the convergence that I see of that tech versus people and performance versus human approach versus making it kind of all running in the same direction. You know, getting that performance, that tech, the human aspects all rowing in one same direction. I continue to see that as a challenge. So whether I'm talking with a founder that has 20 employees or 200 or way more than that, it's all the same. It's all about the people is what it comes down to. So, and even, we were talking about Brad Jacobs or some of the biggest names in business at times. What do they usually end up talking about as far as what was the hardest thing they learned as a leader? What is still the hardest thing about their business? What are the challenges? It's almost always about the people. A lot of the tech and products and innovation, a lot of that stuff is actually pretty, just on kind of cruise control for some of those companies. Not to downplay the efforts there, but they're so good at that. The people side is where a lot of the companies
Yeah.
struggle, regardless of size. That's a lot of times what I hear.
In talking to leaders, are you seeing more effort, especially with adoption of AI, to use AI for good? Like, is there a trend for that, or is it more strictly around automation and reducing cost and headcount? Or some talking about how they can use AI to level up people, even to potentially even spread more empathy or be more purpose driven? I ask that because the team that I work with, we launched a product earlier this year. It's AI CMO, which is empathy led marketing, purpose driven marketing. And one of the first things we ask people to do is to actually establish what their purpose is as a brand. And then we build voice around it so that it's designed to not just be another voice. Everybody's talking through a megaphone trying to get everybody's attention. It's designed to resonate with the buyers who are actually going to tie into this idea of being part of your same purpose, right? And so that's our way of using AI in a way that's good. It also turns out that we've seen a 56% improvement in CTR and click-through rate when people operate with these kinds of campaigns. So there's a performance. It's interesting how when you do good by people, there's a performance element that automatically happens too. It's funny how it works that way. So I'm just
Right.
curious what you're hearing in the marketplace from leaders you're talking to as being intentional on how they're using AI to do good versus just profits and cost cutting.
I hear both, but
Mm.
I the adoption aspects seem to go much better. To your point, when people are, it's enabling, empowering. It is helping people elevate their game. Is where I hear
Yeah,
there's a lot of success. When it's a replacement thing and it's more of just well, let's see how we can just cut cost. A lot of times that ends up backfiring from a people
yeah,
perspective. It's kind of like the old thing, like if you're going to cut 1,000 people, you're going to end up losing 2,000 people,
yeah,
because if you're going to bring in a bunch of technology that ends up replacing people versus maybe training them how to use it, or redeploying them in another fashion so that
mm,
technology can help, you know, duplicate or double your power versus cut it and just try to make technology the answer. A
yeah,
lot of times that's where the gap is. It's both. It's not one or the other kind
yeah.
of thing. That seems to be the successful route.
I just love that there's a validation when you take a human centric approach to a product or service and it outperforms one that's taking that approach of savings and performance only. Uh, that's that validation point that says, if you focus on people's needs first, if you're empathetic on how you do things, the performance will follow. And we still have to sell the performance because that people care about that, right? But
Right.
so
Right.
it's great that happens because you're always like, we're going to put this out and it's going to be great, but is it going to perform? And then when the performance happens, you're like, great, this is going to help the performance mongers to say, hey, that actually is something we need, right? But then there's the
Yep.
challenge of helping them transition the mindset because you have to integrate a different mindset to do that. So hopefully we'll find that happy medium sometime in the near future. But I'm encouraged to see that you're getting a split feedback on that, and uh, the people will perform. The not people focused stuff will eventually reveal itself as not effective, and hopefully people will come around. If they don't, they'll be out of business. That's the prediction I make. There's the controversial prediction I make. If you don't adopt this, if you don't adopt a people centric approach to your business, you're going to be out of business within the next 10 years. Things are going to change dramatically. That's
It's a both, right? It's the tech and people side. It's
Yes,
not one or
both,
the
both.
other, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, actually,
Yeah.
the humanness is going to become a competitive advantage because what's great about tech is it democratizes access. So everyone has the same stuff and capability.
Yep.
So how do you differentiate yourself? This is why I always say empathy will always win. Even at this company we were with, we were competing in the software engineering space with many players, and your product are engineers, and everyone's got access to the same talent pool. So there's no differentiation in terms of capabilities. We've got the same talent pool we're tapping into to solve a problem. So what differentiates one over the other? Well, one of the things that we discovered is when a CTO is going to a vendor asking for talent that they can hire to put on a project, they're showing up already defeated because what they really wanted was a dedicated, loyal, committed employee. But they couldn't find that dedicated, committed employee because either they're competing with the big tech that's paying them a lot of money and they can't compete with them, or there's just not enough of them in the
Hmm.
US market, for example, right? So now they're already showing up feeling like, I'm not really getting what I really want, but let me see if I can get something close. So we would acknowledge that in our sales model. We would say, we get what you really want. That's never going to be better than that. But we're going to closely replicate that experience for you. That's really our intention, so that it feels like you've got a dedicated team that's yours, that you can feel like they're going to be loyal and committed. And we have a history of people that have stayed with clients 5, 6, 7 years. So there was proof points associated with that. But that was because it was tied into this empathetic approach of understanding and acknowledging what you really want, right? It's not the transaction that people care about, it's how it makes them feel. And so 9 out of 10 times, those CTO would choose us because they didn't even know why they were choosing us. They just felt like these guys get me. I want to do business with people that get me. And it's the same concept of like you're going for a job interview and you need a new suit. Or is it really about the suit or how it makes you feel? Why do you need a new
Right.
suit? I want to show up powerful. I want to show up confident. So you can buy a suit anywhere. You can even buy it online. But you might go and levitate towards that store that's like listening to you. What do you need this suit for? A job interview. Oh, so you need something that's going to make you feel confident and powerful? Yeah, exactly. Who do you think you're going to buy from? The company that gets what you really desire, right? It's not the transaction we care about.
Mhm.
It's the experience, the feeling. So companies that understand that are going to do extraordinarily well. So the humanness of business, and as we digitize more and more, will become a competitive advantage. Right now, the technology is a competitive advantage, but once that's equalized, the humanness becomes the competitive advantage. The company that makes you feel like you belong there. Those
Right.
who are focusing on building community instead of customers. Steve Jobs was masterful at this, right? He he created a community. The cool kids use Macs. The creative use Macs. The crazies that make the world go around use a Mac. It wasn't even
Yep.
a superior technology. The PC was way better, but he created a community and it catered to that community. Now, eventually, the Mac became the predominant PC in the marketplace, right? But it started by building community. And it was a feeling you got from buying the Mac. It wasn't the technology itself. He was masterful. It was a design thinking master, right? So that more and more as time evolves and we become more digitized and feel more disconnected with screen time instead of people to people time, the humanist will become a competitive advantage. So companies that are adopting that now will find themselves ahead. Companies who are resisting it, I'm sorry to say, they will find themselves behind, but that's just the reality of how it's going to play out.
Definitely. Appreciate you sharing. Before we wrap, how can listeners best find you or follow you and your company?
They can look me up on TullioSiragusa.com. All my social links are there as well. All my socials are at Tullio Siragusa, Tullio Siragusa, Siragusa. They can find me pretty much anywhere: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and on my website. You can email me if you want to reach out to me. Very easy to find. I'd love to hear from you. If any of this resonates, you need some help, or you want to bounce some ideas, I'm happy to be of service.
Sounds good. And Tulio, we'll put that in the show notes too. So no worries
Great.
there. Um, last question for you before we wrap. What do you want those who have worked with you to say about your impact on them?
That I made them feel better about themselves, that I helped them believe in themselves more, that I helped them feel empowered. That's my end goal. If I can help someone feel like they can achieve more than they thought they could, I have done my job. I have fulfilled my purpose in life.
Good stuff. Tulio Siragusa, thank you for your time today. We appreciate you sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.